A Unit 6 test. Number 1. How did the U.S. Congress initially respond to the aggressive actions of Germany and Italy that were leading to World War II? A. By the U.S. maintaining a policy of isolationism and the passage of neutrality acts to avoid involvement in the war. B. By the establishment of the Lend-Lease policy giving weapons to Germany. C. By dramatically increasing the size of the U.S. Army and Navy. D. By removing the U.S. from the League of Nations. Number 2. How did the Rhineland represent tensions left over from World War I? A. Germany overthrew Spain in World War I and gained all of Spain's empire. B. Germany was fighting in a civil war over the Treaty of Versailles. C. Germany began to increase the size of the military, which was against the Treaty of Versailles. D. Britain began to invade Poland, which sparked the start of World War II due to bad feelings over the assassination of Britain's Prime Minister. Number 3. The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated. That 4 great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever laid to reason. In the prisoner's dock sit 20-odd broken men, reproached by the humiliation of those that have led almost as bitterly as by the desolation of those that have been attacked. Their personal capacity for evil is forever past. It is hard not to perceive in these men as captives by the power by which as Nazi leaders they once dominated much of the world and terrified most of it. Merely as individuals, their fate is of little consequence to the world. That come from R. Justice Jackson in 1946. The above excerpt came from A. The U.S. and congressional debate over neutrality at the start of World War II. B. The joint Allied and NATO plan for the post-war world. C. The Nuremberg trials of Nazi Party members for their war crimes of the Holocaust. D. The internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Number 4. In a speech in 1940, FDR promised the American people that their sons would not have to fight in a foreign war. Nevertheless, FDR wanted to support Britain and believed the United States should serve as a great arsenal of democracy. Churchill pleaded, "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." This pushed Congress to pass the cash and carry policy. What impact did this have on the U.S. support for the war? A. To sell war materials and supplies to the British and other allies. B. To outlaw all sale of military supplies outside the U.S. C. To prohibit all credit extension to the Allies. Or D. To avoid any U.S. involvement in World War II. Number 5. Mobilization of economic resources to ensure enough supplies were created for the military in World War II was administered and directed by which of the following agencies in the United States? A. The War Production Board. B. Civilian War Corps. C. Tennessee Valley Authority. D. Selective Service and Training Act. Number 6. The Allied invasion of Axis-controlled Europe was one of the most difficult tasks of World War II. The United States worked closely with the British military to develop a plan to take control of France and invade Germany. This became known as Operation Blank and was put into action with the Allied invasion of Normandy, France, known as Blank. Is it A. Island hopping in Midway? B. Schlieffen and Rhineland? C. Torch, North Africa? D. Overlord D-Day. Number 7. Rosie the Riveter was used as a symbol for A. The strength and endurance of American military products. B. The reliance of war industries on women workers. C. Anger and resentment of women in the workplace. D. Popularity of cartoon characters from the 1940s. Number 8. Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. Which of the following events led to the United States joining World War II? A. Invasion of Poland. B. Invasion of the Sudetenland. C. The attack on Pearl Harbor. D. The attack on Midway. Number 9. Britain was the last country standing against Germany in the Western Front after France's surrender. To avoid attacking Britain by sea, facing their strong navy, Germany attempted to bomb Britain into submission. The Battle of Britain demonstrated the use of which of the following technologies during World War II? A. The Royal Air Force used radar to detect the attacks of the Luftwaffe, which allowed Britain to never surrender. B. U-boats that sank merchant ships in the English Channel. C. Machine guns that created trench warfare and created a stalemate in Britain. D. Mustard gas that led to the invention of gas masks. Number 10. During the 1930s, Hitler and other Axis leaders began to violate terms from the Treaty of Versailles. This was due to the lack of enforcement from the blank, which proved unable to control aggressive nations without the support of the blank. Just gonna fix that real quick. Okay, which proved unable to control aggressive nations without the support of the blank. Sorry about that, guys. Number 11. The Japanese strategy at the end of World War II was A. The usage of atomic bombs to destroy the enemy. B. Using kamikaze or suicide pilots to crash into U.S. ships. C. Using the scorched earth tactics to destroy resources of the Allies. D. Island hopping to defeat the Allied powers. Number 12. What military tactic was used by the German military allowed them to quickly take over Poland and France with little opposition? A. Wolfpack. B. Atomic weapons. C. Blitzkrieg. D. Sherman tanks. Number 13. The greatest challenge faced by the United States in World War II was the existence of a two-theater war. Supporting both the war in Europe and in the Pacific posed many challenges for the United States military and home front. To address the challenge of fighting two vastly different fronts, the United States appointed General Blank to lead the U.S. forces in Europe and General Blank to lead the U.S. forces in the Pacific. Is it A. MacArthur and Eisenhower? B. Patton and MacArthur? C. Eisenhower and MacArthur? D. Patton and Eisenhower. Number 14. In 1933, Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor of Germany as part of the blank political party that supported a blank style of government. Is it A. Reich and fascist? B. Nazi and socialist? C. Communist and total? D. Aryan and militaristic. Number 15. The war in the Pacific Theater was much different for the United States than the war in Europe. The United States Navy was responsible for defeating the Japanese in the Pacific Ocean. What military strategy was used by the United States Navy to destroy the Empire of Japan? A. Island hopping to regain control of islands imperialized by the Japanese. B. Unrestricted submarine warfare to destroy the Japanese military. C. Operation Overlord to bomb the Japanese into submission. D. Total war to destroy all resources used by the Japanese military. Number 16. Which of the following statements best explains the rise of totalitarian governments in Europe during the 1930s? A. The people of those nations were desperate for help in recovering from World War I and a depression. B. There was no United Nations or League of Nations to prevent a communist takeover. C. The philosophy of isolationism was sure to spread across the war-ravaged Europe. D. The people despised democracy because the United Nations was prospering in the 1930s. Number 17. By working to prevent conflict, helping parties in conflict make peace, peacekeeping, and creating the conditions to allow peace to hold and flourish, these activities often overlap and should reinforce one another to be effective. What international organization was formed to promote world peace after World War I? 2. A. NATO, B. United Nations, C. League of Nations, or D. the Warsaw Pact? Number 18. Which of the following is illustrated in this cartoon? A. The Rome-Berlin axis between Germany and Italy. B. The formation of the Allied powers. C. The non-aggression pact between Hitler and Stalin. D. Island hopping strategy against Japan. Number 19. The President of the United States of America and the Prime Minister, Mr. Churchill, representing His Majesty's government in the United Kingdom, being met together, deem it right to make known certain common principles in the national policies of their respective countries, on which they base their hopes for a better future for the world. First, their countries seek no aggrandization, territorial or other. Second, they desire to seek no territorial changes that do not accord with the freely expressed wishes of the peoples concerned. Third, they respect the right of all people to choose the form of government under which they will live, and they wish to see sovereign rights and self-government restored to those who have been forcibly deprived of them. From the Atlantic Charter in August of 1941. According to the excerpt above, the purpose of the Atlantic Charter was to A. Maintain the policy of appeasement for the European nations towards Hitler. B. Obtain war materials for the Axis powers from the United States. C. Its statement of war goals and declaration of support for Great Britain. D. Reaffirm that the League of Nations is the ultimate power in the world. Number 20. During World War II, the U.S. government created a system of rationing. What reason is this propaganda poster giving for Americans to support the system? A. So that American and Allied soldiers will have sufficient supplies. B. So that only certain Americans will be able to get a fair amount of consumer goods. C. So that children will have enough to eat in the United States. D. So that foreign populations can continue to buy American farm products. Number 21. By 1940, the United States had made a commitment to stop the spread of the Axis powers and protect Great Britain from being taken over by the German military. Before the United States could execute a planned invasion of Axis-controlled Europe and protect the British, what military action was first taken in the European theater? A. Taking control of North of Africa to invade Italy and eventually Germany. B. Control of the Atlantic to prepare for the invasion of Europe and Africa. C. The strategic bombing of German factories to limit the production of war goods. D. The arrival of newly trained American soldiers to invade Europe. Number 22. And he is himself concerned with 10 millions of Germans, 3 millions of whom are in Czechoslovakia. He felt, therefore, that the Germans should come into the Reich. They wanted to, and he was determined that they should come in. What is the correct statement about the Munich Pact? A. Appeasement is a policy that will lead to peace between Germany and other nations in Europe. B. Appeasement is a policy that the U.S. should support. C. Appeasement is a policy that failed because Germany will seek more power and territory. D. Appeasement is a policy that will lead to greater security for the U.S. and the U.S. allies. Number 23. By the early 1940s, the Empire of Japan had successfully imperialized part of China and several Pacific islands. As the Japanese Empire spread throughout the Pacific, the number of Japanese military bases also increased. This increase in military presence made it impossible for the United States Navy to directly attack the island of Japan. What battle represented the end of Japanese imperialism when the United States military successfully stopped the invasion of New Guinea? A. Battle of Coral Sea. B. Battle of Midway. C. Battle of Iwo Jima. D. Battle of Nagasaki. Okay, number 24. Find number 1 on the map. In this turning point battle in Europe, the Soviet-Russian army turned the Germans back from their invasion of the Soviet Union. A. Stalingrad. B. D-Day. C. El Alamein. D. Battle of the Bulge. Number 25. What was the significance of Battle of the Bulge, which is number 4 on the map? A. This battle was the largest amphibious invasion in history. B. This battle was the first attack on Germany by U.S. forces. C. This battle was led to the invasion of Russia by the United States. D. This battle was Germany's last offensive to prevent invasion of Germany by the Allies. Number 26. It bore no relation to the industrial or social life of our country. It was a separate state with its own airplanes, its own factories, and its thousands of secrets. It had a peculiar sovereignty, one that could bring about the end, peacefully or violently, of all other sovereignties. The object of the project is to produce a practical military weapon in the form of a bomb in which the energy is released by a fast neutron chain reaction in one or more of the materials known to show nuclear fission. Okay, from Robert Serber in the Los Alamos Primer. Number 26, the two above excerpts are referring to A, the putting of Japanese Americans into internment camps, B, the calling for the end of discrimination in the workforce during World War II, C, the U.S. development of an atomic bomb called the Manhattan Project, D, the prevention of the U.S. military from using the convoy system in World War II. Number 27. Adolf Hitler's rise to power in the 1930s and the outbreak of World War II in Europe is directly related to the Treaty of Versailles ending World War II. Provisions from the treaty forced Germany into a depression and created an unstable government that allowed Hitler to take control as a totalitarian leader. As Hitler's power and support grew by the late 1930s, Germany began to challenge the decision made in the Treaty of Versailles. This is seen when Hitler demanded part of Czechoslovakia back, arguing that more than 3 million Germans lived in this territory. As a result of the land being taken from Germany in the treaty, what was this territory called in Czechoslovakia? A. The Rhineland. B. Poland. C. The Sudetenland. D. Vichy. Number 28. The Japanese losses at Iwo Jima and Okinawa had been devastating. Their navy had ceased to exist as an effective fighting force, and the Air Corps had been decimated. This did not change the Japanese resolve to continue fighting the war and refusing to surrender. The United States also suffered heavy losses at Iwo Jima and Okinawa, totaling over 19,000 American casualties. While American forces had made it within 350 miles of mainland Japan, an Allied invasion was still questionable. Why did President Harry S. Truman authorize the use of the atomic bomb in Japan? A. To completely help the Japanese during the war. B. To aid the Chinese Navy in its takeover of Japan. C. To save American lives from a land invasion of Japan. D. The use of forced labor by Japan. Number 29. The United States victory in the Pacific Theater was the culmination of several battles encompassing many Pacific islands controlled by the Japanese. Why was the Battle of Midway considered to be the turning point? A. U.S. destroyed Japan's will to fight against the U.S. and forced to surrender. B. Japan destroyed the U.S. aircraft carrier fleet, forcing the U.S. to retreat back to Hawaii. C. U.S. broke Japanese code and destroyed several aircraft carriers that could not be replaced. D. Japan surrendered to the United States, ending the war in the Pacific Theater. Number 30. Hitler's rise to power in the 1930s began with his election as chancellor. From this position of political power, Hitler quickly took complete control of Germany through the use of force. This was accomplished from the building of a large military and the use of scare tactics associated with the secret police. During this time, Hitler supported the idea of the German Aryan race as being the superior to all others and placed blame on the Jewish people for German problems. This opposition to Jewish people is known as what? A. Final solution. B. The Schlieffen Plan. C. Anti-Semitism. Or D. Luftwaffe. Number 31. The role of women in American society during World War II was a turning point in the United States history. Women became a key element in the production of war goods, taking on many traditional male jobs to support the war effort. Women also joined branches of the military, taking on non-combat positions to aid the Allies in the war. What organization was created by the United States Air Force to utilize female pilots? A. WAC, B. Waves, C. WASPs, or D. Rosie the Riveter. Number 32. Following the Japanese attacks at Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066. This use of presidential power impeded the rights of many American citizens. What justification did FDR and the United States government have for implementing and enforcing the executive order? To prevent any immigrants to enter the U.S. from Japan or Germany. B, to prevent communists in the U.S. from using terrorist tactics. C, to prevent Hitler from joining forces with Japan and invading the U.S. D, to prevent spies or sympathizers coordinating future attacks along the West Coast. Number 33. World War II started in Europe with the A, Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, B, the French invasion of the Rhineland, C, the German blitzkrieg on Poland, or D, the Italian attack on neighboring Spain. Number 34. Following the invasion of France by the German army, part of France joined with Hitler and the Axis powers. This section of France is known as A, Paris, France, B, Vichy, France, C, Rhineland, France, or D, Normandy, France. Number 35. The map picture to the left illustrates what decision made following the end of World War II. A, the strength of the Axis powers at the end of World War II. B, the division of Asia by the Allied powers. C, the different territories that every country should have as stated in the Korean War Armistice. D, the division of Germany into 4 occupation zones as stated in the Potsdam Conference. Number 36. Believing that fighting for American democracy abroad would finally grant African Americans full citizenship at home, civil rights activists put pressure on the U.S. government to allow African American soldiers to fight like men side by side with white troops. Which of the following is not true about African American soldiers during World War II? A, African Americans were not allowed to serve in the military during World War II. B, African Americans were segregated into military units. C, African American soldiers such as the Tuskegee Airmen received combat medals for their service. D, African Americans in the military, mostly cooks, are served by completing manual labor. Number 37. The picture illustrates A, the Japanese invasion of Manchuria in China. B, the huge Axis invasion of Europe called D-Day to liberate England. C, the Allied invasion of North Africa called Operation Torch. Or D, the battles of Marne and Gallipoli in Europe. Number 38. What impact did the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa have on the war in the Pacific? A, the last 2 major battles in the Pacific won by the U.S., so they were close enough to bomb Japan. B, the Japanese government took these islands from the Allied powers easily. C, the U.S. military received a crushing blow from Japan, resulting in the U.S. retreat. D, the U.S. military defeated the Japanese military, resulting in huge victories. Number 39. Which of the following is the significance of the Selective Service Act of 1940? A, it was the first peacetime draft signed by a president. B. It implemented a series of measures to maintain the U.S. policy of isolationism. C. It violated the terms of the League of Nations. D. It made sure that the Axis powers would not raise a large military force. Number 40. In the early 1930s, Hitler began to rebuild the German military. Although this went against the Treaty of Versailles, it improved the German economy and gained Hitler's support from the German people. This allowed Hitler to quickly take over Poland and France using what German military tactic? A. Blitzkrieg. B. Luftwaffe. C. Unrestricted submarine warfare. D. The Schlieffen Plan. Number 41. Under the rule of Adolf Hitler, the persecution and segregation of Jews was implemented in stages. After the Nazi Party achieved power in Germany in 1933, its state-sponsored racism led to anti-Jewish legislation, economic boycotts, and the violence of Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, all of which aimed to systematically isolate Jews from society and drive them out of the country. This eventually escalated to the genocide of Jews in Europe. Death camps such as Auschwitz are the means in which the Nazi Party carried out the Holocaust, which they called the A. Final Solution, B. Blitzkrieg, C. War bond, D. Appeasement. Number 42. The Civilian Exclusion Order Number 34, which during a state of war with Japan and as a protection against espionage and sabotage, was promulgated by the Commanding General of the Western Defense Command under authority of Executive Order Number 9066, in which directed the exclusion after May 9, 1942, from a described West Coast military area of all persons of Japanese ancestry. Held constitutional as of the time it was made, and when the petitioner, an American citizen of Japanese descent whose home was in the described area, violated it. 2. The provisions of the orders requiring persons of Japanese ancestry to report to assembly centers and providing for the detention of such persons in assembly and relocation centers were separate, and their validity is not an issue in this proceeding. Coming from Korematsu versus the United States. What was the decision made of the Supreme Court case above? A. The executive order issued by FDR was not popular in America. B. The Supreme Court ruled the executive order was a valid use of power during wartime. C. FDR decided to rescind the executive order because it was an act of discrimination. D. The Supreme Court declared the executive order of FDR unconstitutional. Number 43. In March of 1938, Hitler annexed Austria into Nazi Germany. This aggressive action of imperialism was banned in the Treaty of Versailles. Hitler's control over Austria did not require the use of violence or force as a result of the positive relationship between the two countries dating back to World War I. What term is used to describe this event? A. The Sudetenland, B. Appeasement, C. The Munich Pact, or D. Anschluss. Number 44. After World War I, there were several economic, political, and social issues that allowed for the rise of totalitarian leaders in Europe. How was Japan's style of government different than that of the other totalitarian leaders of the time? A. Japan was controlled by an emperor, so he was justly granted his power, therefore not a totalitarian leader. B. Japan had a democracy, and their leader was elected into power. C. Japan was under military control, and their emperor served as just a political figure. D. Japan was under the control of China after being imperialized, so had no political power. Number 45. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is the only United States president to be elected to 4 terms. He broke a precedent set by George Washington in the 1940 election when he ran for a 3rd term, and again in 1944. Shortly into his 4th term, on April 12, 1945, President Roosevelt died of medical complications. Who was Roosevelt's vice president that took office and eventually ended World War II in both theaters? A. Dwight D. Eisenhower, B. Paul Tibbets, C. Douglas MacArthur, D. Harry S. Truman. Okay, and then construct a response. You can either label 10, so there's 15 things, or you can label at least 10 of those. Okay, or second choice, use the maps to explain one of the theaters of war. So explain the theater, early access success, the Allied strategy, what was the turning point in that theater, what was the reason for Axis failure in that theater, and explain the end of the war in that theater.